Hey guys, it's Willie Sandry. Today we're going to be looking at how to make custom clamps for a sacrificial fence that you might want to use on your Laguna Fusion F2 table saw. The commercially available versions that you've typically seen in the shop just don't happen to work very well the way the clamp pad lands on the Laguna saws, so we'll come up with a more permanent solution. And that's just what we've done. Stick around, we'll get into it and show you how. So often I like to clamp a sacrificial fence to my table saw, and it's really useful for dado work. I use it a lot of time when I'm making rabbets that are very close to the edge of the fence or cutting tenons on the table saw. It's just something I install on my saw all the time. And the traditional method for doing something like this would be these commercially available clamps, and they all kind of look the same. They have different brands on them, but the basic idea is that you would have holes in the top of your sacrificial fence, and that you could install the clamp in such a way that it would hold it to your factory fence of your saw without interfering with the work. And what I realized was that on this particular fence design of the F1 and F2, that the pad only contacted about half of the rail of the fence here. And so I would wind up kind of tightening these gingerly and then maybe adding some additional clamps, and I just didn't feel fully confident with it as a long-term solution. And so I wanted to come up with something better that would just hold the fence in position with no doubt so I could proceed confidently with my work. The HiLow fence on the Laguna table saws really have some distinct advantages in the wood shop. They just make it a little challenging to attach a sacrificial fence. The typical rockler clamps to hold a sacrificial fence in place just didn't land right on the Laguna saw. I found that only about half of the clamping pad, or maybe even a little less than half of the clamping pad, would land on the fence. And it just wasn't a very secure clamping situation. In fact, I often had to add an auxiliary clamp to hold the fence in place. And the problem with the auxiliary clamp is when you're passing work through the table saw, sometimes it will hang up on the clamp. I tried additional clamps like these from Wood River, and they had the same problem on the Laguna fence. Well, you may have seen these clamping squares floating around online. Their basic purpose is to hold an assembly square, like if you're gluing up a cabinet or a project, and these little specialty clamps hold the square in place to do that. And that's fine for the intended purpose, but I also thought, hey, we could use these to hold a sacrificial fence on the Fusion F2 saw. And as these clamps come, they're very close to being perfect for that situation. What we'll have to do is just modify them by changing out the hardware and the knob and still using this anodized aluminum piece for just the perfect fit on your Fusion F2. And these will hold things very snugly in place so you can really proceed confidently with your work. Now, these particular clamps that came with the clamping square kit are very close to working as is. They just have a couple of problems. The threaded section is a little too long, and it could be something you'd hang up on in regular use. And so I wanted a bolt that was shorter. It's just kind of a basic L-bolt there. And the other issue I had is this stem of the L-bolt is not quite long enough. You want it to pierce down into the hole so it gives you a good grab and holds the sacrificial fence firmly in place. So for a common hardware store solution, we picked up a few of these 5/16 inch square U-bolts, and what you can do is cut them with a hacksaw, and that'll make a perfect L-bolt with a common thread size. The 5/16 threads will fit these Rockler star knobs, which are rubber overmolded. I like to use them anyway just because they're comfortable on the hands. And so once you've made those cuts, you'll wind up with the perfect hardware solution to hold your sacrificial fence in place. It solves the long thread issue, so that's nice and trim where you want it to be. We didn't have to cut the threaded end, that's just how it came. And then as far as the leg that goes down into the hole in your sacrificial fence, you got a nice 2-inch or a little longer length on that so that it's a really secure clamp when in use. And I've been using these for quite some time, and they just work great on the Fusion F2. Okay, once you have your clamping blocks, you'll just need to find or make the appropriate size L-bolts. Here's a comparison between what comes in the clamping square kit and what you'll need for the Laguna saw. You can see how much shorter this non-threaded section is, and it just doesn't get a great bite into the plywood sacrificial fence. And also we're a little bit too long on the threaded section. So that's what we're aiming to fix. And the way we'll do that is just to source a standard square U-bolt from the hardware store. This one's a 5/16 by 18 threads. And all you have to do is just cut it right in here. Leave yourself at least 2 inches of length on the non-threaded section. Cut it with a hacksaw and you'll have the perfect L-bolt for your Laguna fence. And they're just very simple the way they go together. And we'll just use that star knob from Rockler. And it's also a 5/16 by 18, a very common thread size in woodworking stores. And that's how we're going to get our clamp for the Laguna. These are the overmolded knobs you need from Rockler for the clamps. They're the small versions. They measure about 1.25 inches directly across or 1.5 inches diagonally. And they take the 5/16 inch by 18 threads per inch threaded rod. Okay? Easy to find at most hardware stores, or Rockler carries these nice rubber overmolded versions. And that's what you'll need for the clamps. And then just go ahead and drill out the 5/16 holes in your sacrificial fence. And then we'll just cut the square U-bolt with a hacksaw at our mark. And what you wind up with are 4 of the perfect sized L-bolts for our fence clamps. Little softening of the sharp edges with a file, and these will be ready to put in service. To tune the angle of the clamps, just drill a 5/16 hole in a little hardwood block, and while the L-bolt is attached in a vise, just tweak it a little bit so it's slightly more than 90 degrees. And once you've installed all your clamps, just make sure that the sacrificial fence is nice and square to the table saw. Looks great. Okay, well, let's raise the dado blade up into the new sacrificial fence and clear a little space so we can do some work. And the beauty of this system is, since you made the sacrificial fence the exact same length as the aluminum fence on the Fusion F2, every time you install this sacrificial fence, the cutout for the dado blade will be in just the right spot. Well, I just can't tell you how happy I've been with these new clamps and the way that they help me on my Fusion F2 saw. I hope this is something you can easily source and make work in your own shop. Alright guys, there it is, a quick and easy way to add a sacrificial fence to your Fusion table saw. I hope you can round up the hardware and give it a try in your shop this weekend. Thanks for watching.